for days and days.
Okay, let's see. Okay, we have passed 1 o'clock, so might just kick off now to keep the session tight for everyone's lunch break. I'm sure more people will join us later on, but that's absolutely fine. So before we kick off, what I'll do is just welcome our speakers here today. Thank them for taking time out of the day to join us. So we have 2 speakers, Jack Long, who's a higher executive officer in the AEO unit Revenue Customs. Jack's going to speak for a few minutes about an overview of the AEO program and the application process. And then he'll be joined by his colleague, Deirdre Furlong, who's also a higher executive officer with the Customs Compliance Hub. Deirdre will go through the audit process and best practices in preparing your operations for an audit with AEO Customs. We had a bit of a rehearsal yesterday, and kind of hearing the folks speak about the various different operations they engage with and the different kind of initiatives they have. It's kind of useful to just hear what people work and what they do. Kind of sparks interest in yourselves and kind of gives you an idea of what you can apply to your own businesses. It's very useful to be part of these conversations. Within the association, I'll be taking notes throughout the course of this webinar. So when anything gets asked, I will make a recording, make a note of what the question is and what the answer is. And the idea is to prepare a document to share with the membership later on. So I'll be taking notes of all that. This session is being recorded because I had quite a few requests to make a session available afterwards. So if you're not comfortable with yourself on screen, just make sure and switch your camera off. And then there will be time for questions at the end. So you can ask questions either audibly by unmuting yourself or through the chat box as well. So that's enough from me. I'll hand you over to Jack now if you'd like to kick off. And then once Jack's done, we'll go over to Deirdre. Okay, thanks folks.
Thanks, Seamus. Well, you've introduced me right anyway. Jack Long is the name. I work in the central unit. We get all the applications in. And we manage the pre-audit process, checking applications to make sure they're valid, that they've been lodged to the right place, that all the information is correct and right. We then send it out to Deirdre's people, or the LCD, or whichever area actually covers it, and they carry out the evaluation. Once the evaluation has been completed, we get a report back in from Deirdre's people, or from Deirdre, giving us a recommendation whether or not to issue an AEO authorization. At that time, when the certificate issues, you start you off in the monitoring program, which is also done in consultation with and working with Deirdre. You're monitored after 12 months, and again then on a 3-year cycle after that. It can be less than 3 years if we decide we want to keep a closer eye on you, but that's the basic process and that's how it works. Application form is available and it's lodged through the AEO portal, which is a European Commission run piece of software. And they also, at that time, we also get in a self-assessment questionnaire from you. The self-assessment questionnaire is probably the most important document because it answers all the nitty-gritty questions about who you are and what you do, how you work, what you do. It's broken up into the categories. So the more work you put in when you're lodging an AEO application into the self-assessment questionnaire, the easier it becomes for us to carry out the processes to follow. That ties in then with the work that you need to do in order for Deirdre to be able to do her stuff. What's the folder called, Deirdre? Is she there?
The tabulated folder.
Yeah, the tabulated folder, sorry.
The Bible.
Yeah, the Bible. The tabulated folder and the SAQ should be completed at the same time because when you're putting in the answers into the self-assessment questionnaire, it allows you to build up the information that you need in the tabulated folder, which keeps Deirdre happy and it gives her something to work with when she starts doing her work. So that's basically how the application process works. Dee, do you want to take over?
Sorry, yeah, I'm here. Morning or afternoon, folks. I suppose I will start off. I mean, I'm sure most people are aware of exactly what AEO is. It was obviously brought in by the WCO back, God, it'd probably be 15 years now. And it is obviously used to ensure a more secure supply chain and to facilitate legitimate trade. So the main thing to remember is it's based on a customs business partnership. You guys look for it voluntarily. Sorry, I'm getting feedback there. Yeah, you guys look for it voluntarily, and we are here to facilitate your application process, and then on an ongoing basis to help facilitate compliance within the conditions that are attached to it. Obviously, any economic operator established within the customs territory can apply for AEO, but they obviously must have goods that are moving to and from third countries. As Jack said, it's applied for online, and there's some really good notes on the revenue website with regards to like explanatory notes for the SAQ, which I highly recommend people look at. So we take over. Jack gets your application and he sends it up to ourselves here in Dublin or around the country, depending on where you are. What you need to do in advance, I suppose I'm going to start with. Preparation is key when it comes to the SAQ and the application process. There's a lot you can there's a lot you can do in advance of your application. The SAQ is obviously the main part of it, and what I would say is you can't have too much information in it. There's nothing worse than getting an SAQ and there's one word answers. It just means that it takes the process a hell of a lot longer. We have to drag the information out of companies and that. If it looks for, you know, how many directors do you have? You know, we've 3 directors, name them. You know, there's definitely information given on the first page, but you cannot give too much. Policies and that throughout the SAQ, you're asked different questions with regards to logistics, with regards to staffing policies, safety and security. What I have found in the past is we go out and people say, yeah, no, we do have that policy, but they don't have it actually written down. There isn't a staff handbook. There isn't actually somewhere that in writing, you know, where it's in writing that the staff can go and find out exactly what's expected of them or exactly what should happen in different scenarios and that. And that is where the tabulated folder comes in. I joked calling it the Bible, but I'm not really joking because that's exactly what it is. I have one here. I will show you in a second. But basically, the tabulated folder has a kind of all of the broader information about the company. So you're going to have like staff lists, lists of your directors, like full details of them, and policies around hiring staff, around training of staff, around exit interviews when staff leave the company. You're going to have the policy around your computer policy, your computer safety policy, everything. You're going to have site maps. If it's asked for, if a question is asked in the SAQ, the policy referring to the answer is in the tabulated folder. The site map is in the, everything is. I'll just show you now. I don't mean to intimidate you, but this is just one folder. This is the level of documentation that we're talking about. And this is a medium-sized company. It's not a particularly large company, and it is tabulated, as you see. One thing I'm very strict upon, it's tabulated properly. And as you complete the SAQ, you can refer to the document held within the tabulated folder. We don't really expect people to have like the tabulated folder done in full when we get there and for the first site visit. It's something that we work with you on and explain, you know, and tell you exactly what we want to see, because it differs from company to company. But that will be your go-to for AEO. That's where everything is kept. We look for 2 copies. One you guys hold in your own company, and we have another copy. At the moment, we're moving to a digital version of it. We're trying to move everyone to a digital version. But the main thing is that it is kept up to date constantly. So if your policy changes for your computer system, or your computer system itself changes, the details of which are changed in the tabulated folder, you change it in your own, you contact us. If you change security company, again, all of that is updated constantly. And it can be just as simple as shooting us an email to say, hey, we've just changed this, we've updated our tabulated folder, here's a copy for your copy of the tabulated folder. Yeah, so that's kind of like the main thing that we work on throughout the evaluation process. Our job is to go through your SAQ, to look at the answers you've given, you know, ask you to elaborate where it's needed, and then to ensure that all the policies are to a standard that we expect of AEO holders, and that they're all included in the folder. One thing I would advise if you're going for full AEO is doing a site walk. It's simple as this. If you're looking for the full AEO, which includes safety and security, is starting at the door of your building and walking the whole way through and asking simple questions such as, how easy is it to get into the office? What is stopping somebody from walking through your reception area into an office, onto a computer? How much security have you got in the way? Is there a reception desk? Is it manned? Is there CCTV? Is there locks on the door? Is it a fob lock? Is it a keypad? How, even if it's a fob or a keypad, how are they managed? That's a policy you will need included in your folder. If it's a keypad, how often are the codes changed? If there's a high turnover of staff, what way do you deal with that? Obviously, if it's fobs, you can just shut down someone's fob. But if you've had a high turnover of staff, do you have a policy of, okay, if we have 10 people leaving in the space of 3 months, we're going to, you know, change the keypads? It's up to you. It's not for us to tell you what to do, but you need to be looking at that kind of thing. Again, like I said, what kind of CCTV do we have? Where is our comms room? How secure is that? It's the easiest, I suppose, most Fisher Price way of explaining it is, can someone walk in from outside and get to a computer and not even just put a virus on your computers, but can they do up a declaration for a fake transport? Can they get into your warehouse and get goods from your warehouse? Can they get onto your accounts? Like, everything has to be looked at. If you have a warehouse, what way is that set up? Who has access to it? Like, the accounts team don't need access to your warehouse, and vice versa. The warehouse staff don't really need access to your accounts office. So why would it just be open plan and everyone can walk in and out? The roller doors, if there's no truck sitting at them, why are they open? You know, what is the policy around that? Do you have it written down somewhere? Do the staff know what the policy is and how they should be behaving with that kind of security? Looking at, do you have on-site security? Do you have like mobile security company that, you know, just circles the industrial estate you're in? All of this is something that you can be looking at. Like I said, you don't have to have the answers beforehand, but it helps a lot if you've already kind of looked at it yourself, if you've looked inward and saying, you know, how open are we? Yeah, that's kind of the main thing around safety and security. During the evaluation process, the one most important thing is communication. We have had it in the past where we've had companies apply, and then you literally, as the control officer, spend the 120 days that you have to do this process, you spend chasing them for information. Like I said at the start, this is voluntary. You don't have to apply for this. It is the choice of the companies. So it gets really frustrating when the customs officer has to be constantly chasing and constantly trying to pull information from a company. And we have several times gotten to the stage during the evaluation process where we've said, you guys aren't ready. You need to take a step back and, you know, withdraw your application. Because the one thing to remember is, if you apply and you don't get it, you can't apply again for, Jack, just correct me if I'm wrong, 3 years?
Yes, Deirdre, 3 years. Because
yeah,
if we turn you down, if we turn somebody down on your recommendation, because as you say, they're not ready, if it's because of compliance issues, if it's because of safety and security issues, then that's a rejection, and the rejection is valid for 3 years. So if we get to the situation where Dee's just explained, where somebody isn't ready, and we find out that during the evaluation, she'll talk to us. And between the two of us, we'll talk back to whoever we are and explain the consequences of continuing. So there's been lots of cases where applications had been withdrawn when the process had started, and they've come back a couple of years later when they were properly ready.
Yeah, we've seen it a good few times, and I think a lot of the time it's to do with the fact that they just don't really understand how much work is involved in the evaluation process, and completing like the SAQ and the tabulated folder. Like, you'll complete the SAQ and submit it to Jack. You'll complete it at least another 2 to 3 times after that, because there will be changes that we need you to make. So it's not just a case of like, you have this, I don't know what it is, 36-page document or something like that. You've done it once and it's in and you're done. No, you'll have changes to make on it. Guaranteed, doesn't matter how prepared you are, you will have changes. And then we obviously work off the most current version of that. So communication is, what I would say is, have someone assigned to just dealing with this. That is their job for the 120 days that it's going to take, that they are available, you know, for us to get information, to pass on different documents and that. Because if you have someone who, it's kind of their job, but it's not really, and they also have 2 other jobs within the company, well, you're just wasting everybody's time there. And if you're not ready, you're going to have to pull the application and wait another, you know, wait until you are ready, and that's wasted everybody's time. Site visits are an essential part of the evaluation as well. So after we have received your application, we'll spend a week or 2 just going through it, making notes ourselves on different changes that we feel maybe need to be made to the SAQ, on different policies that we want to see in place in your tabulated folder. We'll be in contact with you in the interim, and then we will obviously organise a site visit. There'll probably again be 2 or 3 different site visits, depending on what kind of changes maybe we feel need to be made, or stuff that needs to be double checked again. Especially where safety and security come into it. Like, we might say, you know what, you need extra cameras or whatever, we need to come back out and ensure that they're in place. Different stuff like that always occur. So it definitely gets to the stage where a lot of them we do complete in the 120 days, but sometimes there's external factors that nobody can help. Like, you need to get extra cameras in. At the moment, especially, I know we have a lot of companies who are experiencing delays in that because they just can't get the companies in, the security companies in, because they're just so busy. So that is something that we will work with you on if an extension is necessary, especially due to external factors. But we do our best to ensure that it's completed within the time frame. So you've gotten your AEO, it's signed off on. We've sent back our report, and you now have AEO status. Jack's office will be in contact to I suppose give you the documentation that comes with that, and then the logo as well that can be used on your headed paper and stuff on your website. 12 months later, we return as the control hub to monitor you, and the monitoring is something that continues. As there's no expiry date on your AEO status, the monitoring is something that has to continue with the life of the authorization. The first one is done 12 months after you're authorized, and we look at stuff like, you know, any changes to the company setup. We look at your logistical system. We look at your finances, the latest financial report, obviously we would want a copy of. We look at your compliance when it comes to declarations. And that's something I'd like to, I suppose, just talk about for a second. So when you're applying for it, if you've only ever dealt with the UK and you find yourself now having never completed a SAD, go and import a few things and complete some SADs, because that is part of the evaluation process. We need to see that you can do that, and you can do it to a compliant level. If you're well familiar with MRNs and SADs and AEP and the AIS system, welcome to my world. I hope you're enjoying AIS as much as we are. But that is something that we continuously check. We will take a selection of declarations from the previous 12 months, or if it's, you know, 3 years later from that period of time, and we will go through them. We will look for all supporting documents. When I say supporting documents, I mean commercial invoices, not pro forma invoices, not electronic commercial invoices, the actual commercial invoice. I cannot stress that enough. The commercial invoice, I'll say it again, I will not accept anything less. We look for freight invoices, not a freight note, not a customs, a duty and VAT invoice, a freight invoice. If you are moving products and you are charging people for their freight, whether it be by sea or by air, I want to see an itemized freight invoice. I can't be clearer than that, and I will. I came from audit, customs audit. I am a stickler for that. Jack will tell you, it's something I dig my heels in about. I won't accept anything less. We have dealt with companies that are almost on the cusp of being large cases. I don't care how big or small your company is. You're supposed to keep proper documentation for revenue. I will insist upon it as well. It is not an audit when we go out to monitor you. So if we find an issue within the monitoring, especially where it comes to your declarations, we will allow you to make a supplementary declaration to correct that. During an audit, you obviously can't do that with the selected SADs. We are not there as a collection agency. Like I said, we are there to help with your compliance. If you're having an issue, first of all, you may not know you have an issue. So we're there to identify it for you. And we're there to help you get to a level of compliance if you have slipped slightly. During the evaluation, we want you at that level, and we will do everything within our power to get you to that level. And that is basically what the monitoring is just ensuring that on a 3-yearly basis that you're still up there. And like I've seen the biggest of companies and the smallest of companies, it doesn't really matter. What definitely we find happens sometimes is either the turnover of staff is so frequent that they're not trained properly, and that's where errors occur, or there's no turnover of staff and you have staff that are stagnant in positions for years and years, and they just do it like they're just on autopilot, and mistakes are made, and it, you know, nobody realizes that mistake. So it happens again, and it happens so frequently then that they don't even realize it's a mistake. They just think that's how they're supposed to do their job. And so one thing we do insist upon is self-auditing, especially where it comes to declarations, is taking at least 10% of your declarations every quarter and checking them. I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay now, to just give you an example. I have one company who I was with last week and who do this to an amazing level. And it's the kind of thing, you don't have to follow their Excel sheet exactly, but it's the kind of thing I would expect. So just give me 2 seconds. Sorry. Sorry guys, just bear with me. Okay, can you see my screen? Yeah. So we see here, this is like just a basic Excel sheet. And what I expect people to do is record obviously the date of the SAD itself, checking the consigner, like this company checks every single box on the declarations. We can see there the Incoterms, the amount of invoiced, the currency, the description of the goods. Can I move it over? Sorry. Just trying to, yeah, so that gives you enough of an idea. Every single box this company checks. That to some may seem excessive. To me, that's amazing. That is an amazing like display of self-auditing. Sorry. Seem to be having a bit of a delay there. I'll just stop sharing. And yeah, that's the kind of thing we want to check, like, and for you to keep a record of also. So when we go out on a monitoring and we say, have you self-audited in the last quarter? Yeah, we have. Show it to me. Show me what you've checked. So I can take out that SAD that you've checked. And I can say, well, you know, if there is an error that I find on it, why didn't you find it? And we can work together to say, like, what are your staff missing that I didn't miss? That kind of thing. Yeah. Then I suppose that's the kind of level that we expect you to stay at. And we totally get that at times, maybe you've had a huge turnover of staff and you have a bit of a dip in your compliance because you're getting people trained up. But again, when we go out and monitor it, we like you to be cognizant of that. You know that's happening. You're able to recognize and you're able to show us what you're doing to get everybody up to the level they need to be at. Where we see, I suppose I'm going to move on now just to finish up, where we see non-compliance and just especially where we see like just blatant disregard of the conditions that are put upon you as AEO holders. We, as I said, we try and help you with your compliance, but sometimes we end up at a stage where the company is just not engaging with us or they don't think there's a problem. And then we move into the realm of suspension and revocation. We do not move there easily. We do not move there quickly, but we move there and it has happened. And we give the company every opportunity to rectify the mistakes, to bring themselves back to a compliant level. And we have had companies, I know we had the one the company I just showed the Excel sheet, that particular company was so low on their compliance last year, and the turnaround we've had for them because they engaged with us. They engaged with their control officer is on site, you know, every week or so. They sat down and listened to exactly what problems they had. They didn't bury their head in the sand. They didn't think they knew better than customs. They listened to us. They made changes. They put different policies into place. They trained staff. They began workshopping staff. So rather than retraining older staff who maybe sometimes can be a bit reluctant to new policies and that, they changed the wording of it to workshops and like just small things like that. And now they're one of our golden stars. I suppose I hold them up as a shining example of how to do AEO. But at times we don't have that. We have companies who just push back, ignore us. And Jack can tell you, it's my least favorite thing. I do not like to be ignored. And then you just have to start, you know, I suppose it moves out of, it moves away from Jack and I, and it moves to a higher position within revenue. Then we have to start getting principal officers involved. And like I said, every opportunity is given to a company to self-rectify and to bring themselves back to compliance. But we do often end up at a position where suspension is our only option. And if that doesn't work, revocation. Like I said, it doesn't happen often because we try and appeal to the traders and say, like, you looked for this. Nobody, this is not like income tax. Nobody's making you do this. You looked for it. And that's one thing I always kind of point out to the things like, we didn't ask you to come for AEO. You chose to do it yourself because of the benefits that are involved in it. So again, it just comes down to communication. You know, I don't think I've really anything else left to say. Jack, do you have anything you want to add?
No, well, probably a small little bit. Like it may seem when we talk about the way that we actually try and expect and encourage compliance that it might be a little bit harsh, but at the end of the day, we're also subject to audit. Like in May, we were visited by the European Court of Auditors. There was 3 of them come over. Dee, you were there for a couple of days with it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the most pleasant of experiences because they tend to be quite thorough. And they're checking us to make sure that we're doing our job and we're implementing the legislation the way that's supposed to be implemented. So like there was 30 cases selected and each individual auditor had to explain how they did what they did to get to the result that they had. There were authorizations, there were monitorings, there were suspensions, there were revocations, there were across the gambit. There was also a selection of SADs selected. So we have to do what we do correctly and in compliance with the law. And if it seems sometimes a little bit intense, then there's a reason for it. So that's about it.
Okay, super. Thanks very much. Before we open the floor to questions, there's some questions that came in advance. I might just shoot across to you folks now.
Yep.
Deirdre, I think you might have answered this one already. So a member asked, what percentage of entries should they be auditing a month I think you mentioned should go on for 10% of whatever you do. Is that correct?
10%, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's relative to the size of the company as well. If you only get, 10 SADs in a month, check all 10. But if you get like 1,000, yeah, 10% is fine.
Super. This question here about direct representatives forms. Do they have an expiry date, or how long do they last for, or should they be updated?
Direct representation. I don't think they have an expiry, but
They don't.
No,
But you're
I'm
better
open to
off.
correction, but I'm pretty sure they don't.
Yeah, but you're better off renewing them every couple of years because that look it's safer. As far as I'm aware, there is no expiry date, but
No.
there are always changes within companies, so it might be a way of actually just renewing yourself in a way.
Okay, fair enough. Can internal audit checks be done paperless with all relevant documents on a computer system?
Say that again, James. I didn't hear.
Can internal audit checks be done paperless with all the relevant documents on a computer?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
There's nothing legally to stop it being
No,
done.
yeah, I
in that
wouldn't have a
way.
problem with it being digitalized as long as it's been securely stored on the cloud and whatever.
You would still every now and again have a need to see the paperwork, but they would be the exception rather than the rule. So, like if you've got backup paper hidden away somewhere, then I don't see a reason
If
why.
you can explain to Revenue how you have a paperless office, we'd love to know.
Fair enough. Cool. Okay. Quite a members asking here, is it 3 or 4 years that they have to hold on to their documentation for auditing?
3 years for customer purposes.
3 years.
3 years plus the current.
3 years plus the current. Okay. Okay.
And that's how we can look back on in terms of a customs audit. We look back current year plus 3.
Super. Okay. One just coming to the chat box here now. If the move to the tabulated folder is going online, is there a need to have a hard copy anymore?
That's the easy.
No, but I would want to see it, I suppose, the way we store it online is still tabulated. So you've got your folder and then subfolders, like depending on obviously, we'll say, I think the 1.1 is the general details of the company and that. So we would want it still tabulated rather than just a folder with a load of documents in it still. So if I need to change something, and then I suppose trying to avoid PDFs where you have like 17 pages of information, because that makes it harder to change if stuff kind of needs to be updated. But yeah, no, I have no problem with it being digital. We're trying to move all of our current AEO holders. We are digitalizing it at the moment. We're going to keep their hard copies, but there's nothing in the legislation that states you actually have to have a physical hard copy. And I find it easier, especially now given remote working for both the traders and ourselves. If it's digitalized, it's a lot handier.
Okay, super. That's all the questions I have sent in advance. If anybody has any questions they'd like to either feel free to ask away now or send me a message. I did have one that came in there a moment ago. Is a sample tabulated folder available to review?
No.
I take it the tabulated folder reflects the
SAQ.
Yeah.
So the SAQ gives you the format for it. Like if you break it down by the headings, they're the same as the AEO headings. So
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes logical sense. Yeah. Okay. If any members here have any questions, please feel free to ask away here. I have one in the chat box. How would a company find their own control officer?
They would know if they have a control officer. They would know because they would be present in their warehouse quite regularly. If you do not have a control officer, and you're based within Dublin, we will be your control hub. So there's a difference. Control officer I'm referring to, especially if you have like warehousing, temporary storage, you will know them already. They should be already regularly visiting your premises. Up to now, we were solely AEO only in our office, but we have recently become the control hub. So we will be dealing with the applications and updates to applications for the likes of warehousing, temporary storage, AEO, and then inward outward processing and all of the other special procedures. So actually I see one name on this list of someone who I know I already deal with. We will be seeing companies a lot more regularly now. So I think it will really help with compliance issues. So if we're dealing with you for temporary storage as well, we'll be seeing you on maybe every 6 months or thereabouts and be in contact a lot more regularly. So if something comes up, as the control hub, we'll be the ones to intervene and say, hey guys, you have a problem here. So I would hope that it gives rise to a lot less kind of compliance issues, because it's not 3 years until you see us. You're seeing us a lot more regularly to kind of intervene and say, you've got an issue with your declarations or whatever. But yeah, if you don't already have, if you don't know who your control officer is, chances are you don't have them.
Right. There's just a question. When we're doing the audits, okay, so 10% of our audits, and okay, we're not 100% all the time. What is acceptable? So what would the industry standard be for the percentage of getting the audits right? So is it 99%? Is it 98%?
Well, no, it's not really. I suppose if you're showing me that you're checking 10%,
okay,
I don't expect you, unless you're a really small company with, like I said, only 10 or 20 stats a month, like I don't expect you to be checking everything. And so yes, obviously there's going to be times where stuff is missed on the stuff that you didn't check, and that's fine. But if you can show I checked 10% and 80% of that was fine and 20% needed, like all I need you to show me is that you've done the checks, you've recognized if there's an error, and you've rectified that error. So it's not really like if you say to me, I checked 10% and all 10% were wrong. So, okay, what did you do about that? Well, we went and we found the problem and we found out how it occurred, and we've changed the policy around training, or you've taken steps to ensure that that doesn't happen again. That's all we can ask from you.
Would it be a good idea, I suppose, to have a standard out there that we can all work to? So for argument's sake, if we're at, I think, I'm not going to say, but if you're at 99%, you're good. If you're at 80%, you're bad as such, you know what I mean? So I think at the end.
I think, sorry to cut across you there. I think if you're finding errors, and we'll say it's 20% of errors, the question to ask is, why are they happening? How are they happening? Is it the one person? Yeah. Especially depending on the size of your company. Is it just one person who actually is copy and paste and stuff, and that's what's happening? Or is it throughout the whole company? Like, why is the error happening? If it happens, definitely, like if it happens just once, human error is human error. But if it's happening, regularly, and you're like, why is that still happening now? Or that's happened again. It's looking inward and saying, why is that happening? Why is that person or that team getting this stuff wrong? And it's what steps you take to rectify that. Yeah. It's what we find is it's not that you're finding errors. That's fine. You're supposed to find errors because it's human error. Like, human error happens, but it's how you deal with it, what your approach to it is, and trying to make sure that error stops. That doesn't mean another error isn't going to come up the following month. But it's like what you're doing about that. So I suppose I wouldn't be saying like, oh my God, if you've got 50% off, we're going to be on top of you wondering what's going on. You can have, like I said, you can have 100% errors in the 10% you check. But if you can show me this is what we've done to get rid of that, and we've workshopped our staff, or we've changed logistical systems, or we've done whatever,
okay,
I'll be happy enough with that.
Perfect. Thanks for it.
Deirdre, if I could ask a question, please, of you. You mentioned there earlier on that when doing a document review, you look to see a sales invoice, was it?
A commercial invoice.
A commercial. What if no commercial invoice exists?
How would you have an import of goods with no commercial? Like, are you talking about that if goods are being sent from like sister companies and there was no sale?
No, well, I'll give you an example. We have a client based in the UK, and they have some equipment that they have no use for, and they want to give it to us, and we want to take it from them, and they're not going to charge us for it. Okay,
well then I would ask them to create a commercial invoice with the value of the goods, because you're still going to, like, it's coming from the UK, so obviously it won't be, there'd be ordinarily to be a zero rated duty, but if it's the preferential treatment or whatever. But then I would have it stated on it that the value is for customs purposes only.
Okay, that
So I
declaration.
know that no
Okay,
money change
okay,
hands. I'm not going to be like, show me the
Okay.
payment for this.
Okay,
That kind of thing.
Okay.
The same, sorry, can I say the same applies to, like, if you're making declarations on behalf of somebody else and their sister company in America has sent them products and no money has exchanged hands, I would expect to see the same kind of thing on that as well.
okay, understood. Yep, that's random. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the Liam's question here. And much of the tabulated folder information is required in the SAQ. I don't really know what you mean by that. So if you have, like, if the SAQ asks about your security policy, you can just refer to C tabulate, you know, our security policy is included in tabulated folder C 6.5.2 or whatever the document number refers to, or the question, sorry, from the SAQ. You can just refer to it that way. So if the question is 6.1.2, that's what you would record it as in the tabulated folder. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, Deirdre. That's my question.
You don't need to,
How much
you don't
do
need to
you
give the
need
whole
to?
spiel within the SAQ. You can refer out to it, and that's why we have it, because the boxes are, you know, we don't need like paragraphs of stuff in the SAQ. If you can just refer to it in the policy document in the tabulated folder. And then if you subcontract declarations and transport, how do you include them in the SAQ? So if you are subcontracting work, you would need to record the details of who you're subcontracting to and your standard operating procedures that are agreed between both companies. We would like to see that. I mean, if you're using other AEO authorized companies, they'll already know that you're going to need this information. So you would just, like, if the question is who does your declarations and you use ABC Logistics, you know, you'll answer ABC Logistics, and then you will refer to the tabulated folder in which you will have further details of when the contracts were signed, a copy of the contract, and then the standard operating procedures between both companies. Does that answer your question, Im?
Yeah, it does, Deirdre. Sorry, the other thing is, does the broker or transport company have to be registered for AEO?
Nope.
No. Okay.
But no, I mean, we can't tell you who to do business with, but the thing to remember, I suppose, is if you have done that, the onus is still on you to make sure those checks are done. So if you have somebody else doing your declarations, I still expect you to check 10% of your declarations every quarter to make sure that if an error comes up, as I said, a lot of the times errors come up and people don't even realize that it's happening. So you should be checking their work. They should be checking their work as well, but you are the one that has the AEO status. So I'm going to hold you accountable if they make a mistake, because you should be checking their work as well.
Yep, makes sense.
Deirdre, it's Vincent here.
Hi.
Question for you. I remember seeing in the past where I think it was in an EU website where there was a list of approved training providers for AEO, and certain countries, their customs authorities approved a list of trainers. I don't think Ireland was on that list, and maybe there's no plans or are there plans for Ireland to go on that list. Not every member country had it, but
Yeah,
there were a few that had that official recognition.
that
Well, I
is a
think-
question
well, I-
for Jack.
Yes, it certainly is. That's been an issue with us for the last little while. We've received a few training courses that seem to match up with a document that was prepared in by Brussels, giving all the details of what a training course for AEO purposes should include. But it is not the policy of the Revenue Commissioners, at a very high level, to authorise the providers of those training courses. Now, it doesn't mean that if somebody carries out a training course that's been carried out by one of these providers and presents us with proof of it, it puts us in a position where we have to accept that that's valid, that it meets the criterion. But you're not going to see in the immediate future a list of Irish training courses on the EU website. I know the location you're talking about, but you won't see Irish ones there for the foreseeable future. Not our decision in AEO unit, a decision much higher up the food chain.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Jack. Thank you.
Okay, don't have any other questions in myself as yet. Okay, I think we're okay for questions then. Looks that way.
Well, you know yourself, if there are questions coming
Can I
later,
say-
you
sorry,
can
Jack.
send them on to us. Yeah. Go on, Deirdre.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same, especially I know there's a couple of companies here whose names I recognize. If we're already in contact about other authorizations, guys, feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions. Those of you who don't have my email, feel free to email Jack and ask him the questions. But yeah, like our whole thing, like I said, is to facilitate and get you to a level. So if your company is applying, give us a shout beforehand, and I'll go through this kind of stuff again on a one-to-one basis and say, go and check this and go and check that or whatever. Because it only serves us if you come a little bit more prepared to the table. Like I said, there's nothing worse than you're like, oh my God, why did these people apply for it? They, if you don't fully understand what's involved, you just spent 120 days knocking your head against the wall saying, why are these people doing this to themselves and me? But yeah, give us a shout if you have any questions.
Okay. Super. Okay, I will be preparing a document based on today's session to share with members, so that will come out to you folks in the next couple of days. Thank you both to Jack and Deirdre for their time today, for sharing all their good tips and advice with us. And just while I have a captive audience, I'm going to remind members that we are 7 weeks away from the start of the next IIFA FIA diploma course, which starts on 24th of August. So registration is open for that at the moment. We have a handful of discounted places through CLT Skillnet, half of them gone already. And in addition to that, we also have a kind of low-key introduction to freight forwarding course, which we're running again for the second time in September as well. That'll be mid-September to December. Short-term course, kind of a light touch introduction to the industry. So everybody who's very, very new to the industry, might be useful course to put them on. Not only for operations staff, but also for other people in the freight forwarding firm who want to understand a bit better how the industry works, what all the documentation is, how everything connects together. Okay, so thanks so much for joining us today. You have 10 minutes to eat your sandwich and get back to work. Thanks very much.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, James.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There you go. Take care.
Thanks. Yes.